Artlist sold a year of unlimited AI video generation with Seedance 2.5 for $500, paid up front. Days later, it was gone. This is not a company blindsided by success. I think this is a company that knew exactly what was going to happen and did it anyway. Our recommendation is do not give Artlist your money up front because they cannot be trusted. And that wasn't even the week's biggest shakeup. YouTube just moved the goalposts for every creator on the platform. A view will now, starting from August 24th, so just in a couple days, will now register from the moment the playback starts. From the first frame, no minimum watch time. So that's crazy. Drones are about to get 25% more expensive in the US, and Kodak just posted its best numbers in years on film stock. Let's get started.
This is Focus Check, the weekly Cinetech podcast.
Welcome to episode 130 of Cinety Focus Check podcast. Today, it's just me. Johnny's still in China. We tried the connection. It wasn't great, so you have to make do with me. But I think he's not deep into the subject anyway, because he's very busy with what we're cooking up in China, and we really look forward to telling you in September. But anyway, it's an exciting week. We had a couple of major stories which are industry related, which will affect a lot of us. And let's get started with YouTube, because there's two big stories about YouTube. First of all, YouTube is changing how views are counted, which is going to affect most of us who are actually publishing on YouTube. And the second thing is they are going to change how you can join their partner program. Let's get started with the view count story here. Now, the interesting thing, so far, you might or might not have known, YouTube has only counted your views from 10 seconds onwards, which in a way always meant that a view on YouTube counted more than a view on Instagram or TikTok. Both of those platforms actually always started counting from the first second. But of course, we know, like if you switch through Reels, for example, on Instagram, it might just play something which you immediately skip, so you don't even know what it's about. So even though you only played 1 second, it counts there as a view, not so much on YouTube. So 10 seconds is pretty much engaged viewing, because you will grasp what it's about, even if you skip after 10 seconds. And one of the measures on YouTube, which actually, is worth more than the view count, has always been for us creators, the people with, monetized YouTube channels, how much time people spend on a YouTube video. Good example is this podcast. And actually, we know exactly if an episode is successful if, the average view time is something like 12 or 15 minutes. That's a really, really long time. And it is a long show, but it's a long time to spend on a YouTube video, which means we were able to grasp your attention for that amount of time. Nevertheless, YouTube, for some reason, has decided to change this and adjust it to where the other platforms are. So a view will now, starting from August 24th, so just in a couple days, will now register from the moment the playback starts. From the first frame, no minimum watch time. So that's crazy. Literally, you could just click the play button and close it, and it would count as a view. And it's true for all the formats. There are video on demand, the live streams, the shorts, but also, anything you can get on YouTube. So far, this has only been the case for shorts. This extends the play-based counting shorts, which was adopted already in March 25, basically to the entire platform. Now, actually, I was wrong. It wasn't 10 seconds. It previously required 30 seconds. 30 seconds, so one view would be counted. I mean, arguably 30 seconds might maybe be a little bit too long for some videos. Yes, but I definitely think one frame is not enough. The exact rules were a bit more complicated and are deliberately undisclosed as an anti-gaming defense. I guess they just had some kind of ways to identify bot traffic. So, fake traffic didn't count for some people who would just artificially boost their views. However, that secrecy is now gone, and we just start counting from the first frame. What's important to know, existing videos keep their current totals, which there's not going to be any retroactive recalculation. Only videos uploaded after August 24th will use the new rule. That's interesting, of course, because imagine they would change that retroactively. You would suddenly have millions of views on some videos. And I mean, it would just be completely different from before. So I think that makes sense. The old engagement-based metric survives as engaged views. So in YouTube Analytics, so you will still be able to see the same kind of measurement that was displayed on the front end so far as the total view count. It will just be called engaged views, and you will only see this in the analytics backend. The earnings and partner program eligibility are unaffected, and because they still run on those engaged views. Of course, that makes sense for Google, YouTube, because they don't want to pay you more money. So for that, they still use the engaged views, and we're going to but that program is independently of the view count also changing a little bit in terms of eligibility. When you can be a paid channel, but we'll talk about that in a second. So yeah, basically the metric you've been judged on by still survives under a different name, and the number that actually decides if you're getting paid isn't moving. So that's the important thing here. And what's moving is the big picture under your video and maybe the number you put in front of your sponsor. If you want a sponsor for your video, of course, you will probably tell them that big number that everybody sees. However, everybody will know that it's not as what it used to be, right? I think it's going to be interesting for those huge channels that get a lot of views where you like Mr. Beast or whatever, you see millions and millions of views and suddenly those view numbers will be hundreds of millions suddenly because of that change. But in reality, in the back end, it's not as if people spend more time on your videos. It's just a way of counting is different. Video's stated rationale here for changing this is that standardizing views are meant to reflect true exposure and make creator value easier to show brand partners. So that's the intention here. The practical fallout is that raw views, as I said, will jump, which is kind of an inflation event before and after the comparison break. And the public number just becomes a weaker proxy for actual watching. The community, of course, also criticized this. It's basically, something that's less than a second, in my opinion, just also shouldn't just count as a view. I think maybe 10 seconds should be the threshold here, but that's how it is. So this will start on August 24th, so don't be surprised. We have all the details also in this article if you want to read up on it, and the link is, of course, also in the show notes. So, don't get too excited if you get that many more views on new videos starting next week. It doesn't mean that more people have watched it. It's just a different way of counting because it's going to be true for everybody. The second piece of YouTube news is they are rehauling their partner program. Now, that's the first major threshold change in joining the YouTube creator program since 2018. Now, YouTube frames this as keeping pace with its own scale. They have 200 plus billion daily views on their platform, probably counted from the first frame now. The entry bar for entering the partner program now doubles. New applicants need 1,000 subscribers plus either 8,000 qualified watch hours in 365 days. It used to be 4,000 qualified watch hours, or 20 million qualified short views in 90 days. And that used to be 10 million. Qualified is strict, which means public long form, including podcasts and archived live streams only. Private, unlisted, deleted videos, ad-driven watch time, short watch hours, and non-archived live streams don't count. A qualified short view must be an engaged view, so not a first frame swipe. So you see how they differentiate here. On one hand, they show you this big public number of 200 plus billion views, which probably counts from the first second. But on the other hand, as soon as they need to pay you, the engaged views are starting to count. So that's very interesting. Existing partners, like anybody who was already a creator, is being grandfathered, but must accept the updated terms in YouTube Studio by January 31st, 27, or stop earning from those features like watch page, shorts, commerce modules. Otherwise, you will stop earning from them starting February 1st. And also, existing creator accounts face activity checks, 1,000 qualified watch hours in 365 days, 1 million qualified short views in 90 days, or simply uploading 2 long-form videos or 5 shorts every 90 days. So they have a bit of I didn't even know that. So you can lose your partner status if you don't fulfill those things, which I think makes sense, because otherwise, of course, they just want to keep you engaged. They want to keep you making new content. On the other hand, I don't understand. I mean, those old videos are still being watched, so you probably should be able to make money off of old videos, even if you, for whatever reason, are not continuing to make new ones. But that's the activity check that they make now. So there is a minimum amount of work you need to do. Well, 2 long form videos or 5 shorts every 90 days. That's actually, there's no quality check in those, of course. I guess in theory, you could kind of trick the system, and as long as you have some existing long videos or successful videos there, you could upload anything. However, there is this need now to keep the beast running, I guess. I don't know. There probably was something like this before. I just wasn't aware of it. But you need to do something in order to retain that partner program status. Shorts revenues now gets a separate recurring bar. 10 million qualified short views per 90 days are a requirement to keep earning from shorts, regardless of how the channel originally qualified. That's kind of interesting, because for us, for example, the shorts are just like we cut down short versions of our longer form content and then publish a couple times a week there. We definitely don't do 10 million qualified short views in 90 days. So we definitely won't make any money from that. But that's interesting. I guess that's also to target the group that is specifically making shorts content. So by doing that, they certainly motivate people to kind of make dedicated content for vertical, as opposed to, just recutting like we do, because then I think it's a different audience, right? I mean, you have people using the YouTube app like TikTok or Instagram as well. And those people are generally watching those shorts and probably not watching as many long form videos using the app. That's my guess. So they want to match that. The lower tier is unchanged. Fan funding, memberships, and YouTube shopping are still open at 500 subscribers and 3 uploads in 90 days, either 3,000 watch hours or 3 million shorts views. So my conclusion is, for filmmakers building a channel as a portfolio, as a client magnet or education platform, the lower tier is now the realistic first milestone, while the full ad revenue sharing moves further out of reach for slow growing quality over quantity channels. Basically, they want you to make YouTube your job. That's the idea, I think. They really want you to take this seriously, and they don't want to monetize channels that get a lot of views for some other reasons if it's not regular. So that's kind of my read of those new rules. So I think we just hope that, we were very proud to reach our first 100,000 subscribers a couple of years ago. And something changed after that. For us, it's gotten a lot harder to grow. I mean, we're just below 160,000 now, I think. And I just hope that milestone of the first 100,000 subscribers hasn't become unreachable for newcomers under the new rules. I mean, they really want you. We never kind of formatted our content so it would perform well on YouTube. We just made the content we wanted to make and published it on YouTube, and that's probably why, channel didn't explode like some others. That's fair enough. Our first focus has always been the website. I guess if you identify how YouTube is kind of valuing your content and what kind of content and what rhythm and length and type of content they value, if you identify this now under the new rules, I'm sure you can still grow quickly. Just don't expect to become a, kind of one-hit wonder. I think they want to prevent that. They really want you to produce regular content. And that makes a lot of sense because YouTube, of course, is the biggest video platform in the world, the biggest streaming platform, arguably. And they want to move into a way where they want to motivate creators to do more regular content. Well, actually, maybe we adjusted our content with this podcast, which is a weekly show. But anyways, that's just my read of this. Today's episode is brought to you by the Hollyland Solidcom Intercom series. Here's why I actually like these. It's fully duplex, everyone talks at once, like a real conversation. No push to talk, no walkies clipping over each other. And the dual mic noise cancellation kills around 20 decibels of ambient, like wind, generators, a crowd. The person on the other end just hears you clearly. And there's a version for whatever you're shooting. The C1 Pro is hubless. Pull it out of the case, power on, and 8 people are talking. All day on a full charge. Step up to the M1 Pro or SE Pro when you want belt packs and separate groups. Or the H1 when you're running up to 80 people with roaming across a whole venue. Same headset, bigger crew. Check out the Solidcom series over at hollyland.com. Link is in the description below. And now, back to the show. Let's move on to the Nikon ZR. So, I wrote this piece about the Nikon ZR firmware update that people are still waiting for because we had a article about their numbers, like their quarterly numbers, which weren't great especially on the imaging side. And then, to my surprise, we had lots of comments, especially on social media from people who were kind of disillusioned Nikon ZR owners. A lot of people bought this camera when it came out last September, when it was announced. It was shipped quite quickly after that, I think. And I saw, and I wasn't even aware of that before, we saw a lot of customers who were not happy about like the functions that the camera was still missing. So the hype was great. It was also one of our cameras of the year 25. It was their first Nikon Red kind of co-branded mirrorless camera, but with Nikon as the main brand here. And there's been a couple weak points since the launch, some of which we also identified in our lab test. First of all, they were kind of like, middling lab results, I would say, and especially a widely criticized H.265 image, which is really mushy and not nearly as good as the different raw video codecs you can record in. Now, let's just go through the firmware history a little bit. There has been firmware 1.10 in late January this year, which introduced wired LTC timecode input with JamSync over the 3.5mm jack, red style file naming, a highlight clipping warning on histogram waveform for red NE in log 3G10 and red 3D NE 12-bit selectable in auto. Importable LUTs raised from 10 to 50 and maximum continuous recording raised from 125 to 360 minutes in ProRes 422HQ, H.265, H.264. With external power excluding the raw formats. Now, there was another smaller update in March, the 1.11, and that's where the disappointment started. Per Nikon's own changelog, exactly 2 bug fixes were made in this small update, which was like, touch control with gloves mode, a shutter speed issue with high frequency flicker reduction. And 5 months later, we're still on that firmware. The owner wish list is remarkably consistent across different groups, forums, and reviewer videos, a lot of which I went through for this article. And it's almost entirely about exposure tools. What Nikon has publicly promised at NAB 26 was red log 3G10 in H.265. So basically the log color science without shooting RAW, which you still cannot do. A general H.265 quality fix, which, a lot of people don't like what it looks like because it is bad. And focus peaking while recording red 3D NE, LUT pass-through over HDMI, and a fix for the external audio with timecode recording bug. None of that has shipped, and people are still waiting. So, of course, we'll try to get hold of Nikon at IBC and ask them. Maybe they will hopefully release something around IBC, because that camera was announced, I think, at IBC, or actually first shown at IBC last year. You can see, really just go through the comments on our article, also on social media. Even if you're not a ZR owner, that's crazy. A lot of people are really disappointed with Nikon here. And I think it's not really that it's taken that long. Of course, that's part of it. It's just a lack of communication here. They just don't tell you when something is coming. And some people made a really good point. There needs to be a middle ground between how Red used to communicate and how Nikon is communicating, because Red always overpromised. They always said what was coming, but then, they kept delaying deadlines because they couldn't hit them. So they were overly enthusiastic. I would say that's maybe the American way. And then the Japanese way was, we will just tell you that there is something new when we have it. And that's what we have now with the ZR. And I think we need a little bit of a middle ground. And I think, some companies are doing this better than others. We have talked about the Sony FX5 thing, which is a bit of a frustration for a lot of people too, because Sony has announced that their big version 2 firmware upgrade is only coming, end of fall next year. And of course, that's very far out still, but we know that it will come. And, Sony usually sticks to those deadlines. At least we know it's coming. The Nikons that are users just want to know, when are the things coming that have been promised. I think that's the frustration here. Even if it's just give them, if you're Nikon, if you work for Nikon and our plan is to have that done in, let's say, January, tell people it's coming in April. Then you deliver it in February and everybody's going to be happy. That's my approach here. That's how I would do it. Just don't overpromise, but give people something to look forward to. That's how I would do this. Anyway, link in the show notes, of course, as everything. Next topic, US drone tariffs. Now that's interesting. So let's put it this way. The US drone market was already squeezed before this. In December 25, we know that the FCC put DJI, Autel, and effectively all foreign-made drones on its covered list, blocking new equipment authorizations. Any device with a radio transmitter needs an FCC ID to be sold in the US, which is why the Mavic 4 Pro and the Mini 4 Pro never officially launched there. Now, but this week's action is a different level entirely, a customs tax on drones that are still legal to import. So what happened? The US president signed a proclamation on August 13th, which, is part of a Trade Expansion Act of 1962. Basically, a national security authority behind steel, aluminum, and copper tariffs, following a commerce investigation that found that the US is too reliant on foreign drones, foreign sources of drones, and this is effective for goods entering from September 3rd. Long story short, there's going to be a 25% tariff on camera drones below 25 kilograms or 55 pounds without thermal imaging. It also includes the sub 250 gram category, which of course is affecting all of the entry-level drones from DJI, the mini line, also the anti-gravity A1, which is Insta360's 8K 360 drone, and also the Hover Air line, including that Aqua drone that we reported about. But of course, the ones mostly affected is going to be, again, DJI entry-level drones. There's going to be 100% tariff on any drone with thermal imager, regardless of weights. That duty applies to the full value of the aircraft. And it's true for anything over 25 kilograms, docking stations, and listed critical parts. So that's basically those drones, not really for filmmakers, but those that are for inspection, agriculture, and maybe the big ones for wildlife documentary world, the heavy lifters, basically. This stacks on top of existing duties. So that's if there is already existing duties on them, this will be on top. There are caps for allied partners of the US. It's only going to be 15% for drones from the EU, Japan, Korea, Taiwan, Switzerland, Liechtenstein, and 10% for the UK. But that's, how many? There's probably no drone makers that are relevant for filmmakers from those countries anyway. So, unfortunately, US filmmakers are going to be affected by that. So if you want to buy a DJI drone in the US soon, I would do it before September 3rd, because you are going to see that difference in pricing on B&H and other retailers, of course. From February 9th, 27, also propellers, rotors, undercarriages, and airframe parts at 25%. And basically, this can be expanded to more components of drones. So basically, it will affect everything that is replacement parts for drones as well. Just be aware of that. If you're running a rental house or you need spare parts, you might want to order them before that as well, before February. But again, just the full drone is going to be affected already September 3rd. So it's not a block. That's still, we still know that DJI is still kind of not able to sell new products in the US. And that's independent of that. So this also affects drones that are already in the market. The new ones are not being added anyway, but the existing ones now also get more expensive. And and in this case, what's important to note here is that gray imports don't escape this. Because you are able to buy a DJI Mini 5 in the US just at a higher price because there are these gray imports. However, in this case, those gray imports will not escape this because those gray imports will clear customs just like anything else as well. And this is very hard to unwind because in February, the Supreme Court invalidated the 2025 reciprocal tariffs. If you remember, now these duties are not affected because that they are resting on a section in those rulings which survived this Supreme Court ruling. But there's only one relief here. Companies committing to build US production can apply to import covered products duty-free during construction, which does really nothing for filmmakers. So that basically means only if a company like DJI would be willing to start a factory in America, they could avoid this. So they're really trying, the government is really trying from all sides to kind of clamp down on DJI, if you will. It's a tough position for them, also in the future. Good. Let's move on to Artlist. Now, this is something that I was made aware of through some Instagram posts. I saw the comment section on somebody that there was some posts from Artlist and I just saw the comments and there were hundreds and hundreds of comments of people who were extremely angry at Artlist. And then I dived into that and did a bit of a background check. So what happened? Artlist, of course, a lot of people know, is a subscription platform that has been around for a while. They originally started with music and special effects licensing, and now they're really pushing hard into AI tools, generative video AI specifically, and photo AI. Now, we know that Seedance 2.5, that's ByteDance flagship AI video model and arguably the best quality model in the market now in terms of realism, has now gone mainstream. I mean, we reported about the API access a couple of weeks ago, and only last week or 2 weeks ago, it became mainstream. Now you can just basically use it from any platform. And websites like Artlist are basically, I would say, tokens resellers. So basically they just give you access to that Seedance model. It doesn't even run through their own server. So they have API access. They charge you for those tokens, and they get charged by ByteDance for actually using the model on their server farms. But in the end, Artlist, just like Higgsfield and all those other AI video platforms, is just an intermediary to give you access to the Google models, or in this case, the ByteDance models, and so on, and the many others that are out there. Now, of course, Seedance 2.5 has a great reputation for this realism. We reported about this viral clip from Seedance 2, I think it was. There was a fight between Brad Pitt and Tom Cruise, which went viral, a year ago or so. That was from the predecessor model, and that's what shocked a lot of people in Hollywood for its realism. A lot of people want to try Seedance 2.5, and the way that Artlist actually advertised access to Seedance 2.5 was that they would give you a year of unlimited access to this model. Now, that's expensive to run. A lot of people were skeptical when they announced that, because no other competitor was kind of claiming that they could do this. If you look at the published API pricing from ByteDance, this works out for $0.47 per second of 720p video. That's about $14 for a 30-second clip. That's quite expensive to run, right? I mean, that's the API pricing, which is the cheaper pricing. Now, what happened? Artlist spent a weekend or more than a weekend marketing its annual AI creator subscription for $500, paid in full upfront as 12 months of unlimited Seedance 2.5 access. And they actually actively pointed at rivals offering only a week to make their deal look a lot more generous, of course. Now, within days, they pulled the model from their unlimited on every plan. So the Seedance 2.5 was gone within a few days. And paying customers were handed a credit allowance worth a small fraction of what they actually paid. Artlist calls this a demand problem. In a statement to affected customers, Artlist admitted it made a huge commitment that we couldn't keep and said it was owning the mistake, which I call in the article the most honest sentence anyone at Artlist produced this week, because the math didn't make sense from the start, and they must have known that. Artlist's own promotion implied 2,550 seconds of generation per day. That's about 85 30-second clips daily, and that would be up to $1,190 per day in raw inference cost against a $500 a year price. The pricing of the underlying model says that this was a promise the company could never have funded. So it just doesn't make sense, in no way they could have made sense of that. I mean, look at those ads. Those were the ads they ran. It doesn't get more apparent than that, right? I mean, there's no subtlety about that. They say unlimited Seedance 2.5, and of course a lot of people jumped at that. If you look at the competition, they never advertised it like that. They gave some limited, that's another ad that they ran. unlimited for a full year. Of course, a lot of people got excited about that and just sign up for it. Now, the legal kicker here, Artlist's terms already reserved the right to withdraw any model at any time, meaning the acquisition campaign was built around the promise the company was contractually excused from keeping before it even started. This is not a company blindsided by success. I think this is a company that knew exactly what was going to happen and did it anyway. My recommendation, our recommendation is do not give Artlist your money up front because they cannot be trusted. That's my read here. And it's just crazy that something like this can happen. And I think they are in the background a little bit in a competition with Higgsfield to get their evaluation up. Higgsfield now has, I don't know, like many of those AI companies, has quadrupled their evaluation within a couple of months. And I think Artlist is their biggest competitor here. So they're trying everything to get more customers to basically, make everybody believe that this is a hugely successful business. But in reality, we know that all of those companies are just reselling API access to models that other companies made. So what I don't understand, I would, if I were ByteDance or any of those model makers, I would own that market. I would just make everything. If I had the best model in the market, and I'm not, that putting aside all the ethical things that we've often talked about on AI video generation, it is still going to happen. It's still, a lot of people are going to use this, whether we like it or not. And if you are the one that makes this model, sell it directly. Do everything to sell this directly and don't bet too much on, of course, it's easier for them. They don't have to build the best front end or whatnot and have somebody else resell it. But you see what's happening. That's exactly the kind of stuff that, destroys your reputation, even if you have nothing to do with it as the company who makes the model, because the reseller kind of, makes overpromises what they can do. But that's just my 2 cents. All right, let's move on to Honor. We know that this, has been teased for a while. This is the co-engineered with ARRI phone that we've been waiting for. They launched their first robot phone, and we also already saw a couple videos out there from creators who had access to that phone before or were invited to Honor's event in China. And it is arguably, I think, in terms of hardware, something I haven't seen that much hardware innovation in a phone for years, because it is a phone with a built-in gimbal which just folds out when you actually touch it, which of course is remarkable. It's kind of like an Osmo Pocket built into your phone, and it's something I haven't seen before. And from the footage that I have seen, it looks pretty nice, actually. The ARRI Image Science, that's a Log C3 from ARRI, not Log C4, but Log C3 looks are built into it. And they have a very nice video explaining how the ARRI Wide Gamut 3 is being refined and actually for this phone. Now, this doesn't seem to be like, just a sticker on a phone from a different manufacturer. They actually worked to apply that Log C3 image and kind of made it work for the Honor phone. And that's kind of remarkable. I also, as you know, I've had a lot of contact with people from ARRI around the Eurovision behind the scenes production that we did. And I know that they were deeply involved with the color science of this phone. So it's really not just a sticker on top of this. So I really look forward. I hope we get access to this phone too, to play with it, maybe review it, because I think it's solving one of the problems I actually have, for example, with the Osmo Pocket line in general, is that the screen is so small. It just makes it very hard to judge the image. And if you have this, of course, in a phone, that's a problem you won't have anymore, because you will just see it in a bigger way. And They also hired Claudio Miranda to shoot a 30-second spec film, which is very interesting. It's very short. There's not much you can judge here. It looks like a Tron style little thing. And yeah, definitely a promo piece. I think you can't call this in any way a review. But yeah, it looks nice, I guess. And the video I can recommend the most, actually, I embedded it in the article, is from Matti Haapoja, because he was invited to the event from Honor in China as well. And he actually showed a very good look at the phone. So I recommend you to watch Matty's video here. There's not that many creators who had access to it before. And I think he did a really good job around this event, showcasing the technology and also the intention behind this. Anyway, so it's not the budget ARRI camera we were hoping for, I guess, but it is a step in the right direction in our opinion. If you haven't seen it, we did a really nice, very long sit-down interview with the new ARRI owner, Thomas Riedel, and also the two managing directors, Chris Richter and David Bernbach, just ahead of NAB. And that's an exclusive interview, which gives you a lot of hints of where the company is headed here. But yeah, I'm happy to see that this integration seems to be working well. There's a lot of excitement about this phone, and I think it will do really well. I just wonder how heavy it is, actually, if it can be your everyday phone in your pocket. But it is an impressible marketing feat. Now imagine this with a low fix sensor that the Osmo Pocket 4P has. Kind of cool to have a gimbal always in your pocket with a 17 stops dynamic range camera tested in our lab. So pretty cool. Let's see. All right, moving on to RocXZoom. Now what is that? So there's a couple of DJI engineers that kind of made their own thing. And this is a robotic 50x zoom camera with AI subject tracking. And actually, it's another kind of large gimbal device with a big screen attached, I would say. So it's much bigger than the Honor phone. Of course, it's not a phone. It's really, really interesting in its approach, I think. And how the company behind this is called Farseer Tech, and they really, on their website, even put the DJI logo. I don't know how happy DJI will be about this, but it says built by ex-engineers from DJI, and then you have like 10 engineers, including the CEO, who was a DJI imaging systems engineer. And yeah, and they made their own camera. Now, what is it? It looks a little bit similar to the camera head, like the Zenmuse from the Inspire and the Ronin 4D. And it's a 400-gram handheld camera combining a 50x hybrid zoom, which is 20x optical, 40 to 2000 millimeter full frame equivalent, a motorized pan tilt head, and an on-device computer vision subject tracking. So it is meant to be handheld. It is meant to be pocketable, but it is a larger sensor, although I'm not sure if we know what kind of sensor size it has, because it is a fixed lens. It's certainly not full frame. Now, the pitch, as we put it in the article, at extreme focal length, of course, we know that every heartbeat basically becomes, frame filling shake. And keeping a moving subject centers is really a gamble if you do that with a long telephoto, if you don't have a stabilizer. But in this case, they say that robotics can actually fix that problem rather than the technique. So they kind of put the stabilization into the robo arm. And that's how they say you can actually stabilize 2000 millimeters from your hand using this device. There's also a pro version of this, which promises the same AI tracking, but for your existing camera and lenses. So that's basically it looks like a normal gimbal, and you can put your existing camera on it. It's basically what we asked for in the Ronin 4D poll. Well, maybe, I don't know if it has actually the fourth axis. I mean, I think it's more meant to stabilize those long telephoto shots than running around with it. But I would be happy to be proven wrong. I hope we get access to this. We will, of course, contact the manufacturer. And it is a Kickstarter campaign, of course. Just be aware, it is, crowdfunding. So you never know if a product will actually see the light of day. Of course, they do their best to kind of make you believe that it's gonna ship properly with all that DJI heritage behind it, but still, it is a unknown company in that sense. But it looks very, very promising, I think. Now, early bird pricing starts from $450. It was shown at CES 26, and just interesting. Will be interesting to see. I think it's funny because it's kind of like it looks almost like a shrunk version of the Ronin 4D. In a little bit, it's maybe something we've been expecting from DJI as we outlined in that poll. Maybe it will come from the new kid on the block, which is Farseer Tech. Maybe DJI didn't want to do this internally and they just decided to leave because they saw the potential. Who knows? But it is definitely something where I also see a lot of potential if executed correctly. So let's see what the RocXZoom will be like when it's out. 50x zoom, stabilized from your hand. Sounds pretty cool, actually. All right, let's move on to Sony and TSMC, who have signed a definite sensor deal. Now, we reported about this before. Sony Semiconductor Solutions is the world's dominant image sensor maker, specifically for smartphones. Its sensors also sit in iPhones and in most mirrorless bodies, including a lot of the competitors. And of course, Sony's own Alpha and Cinema line. TSMC is a Taiwanese contract foundry that helps build the chips for Apple and NVIDIA. Sony historically always designed and manufactured sensors entirely in-house. But there was, in May, we reported about a vague memorandum which announced a joint venture between the two companies. And this now is the binding version. Now, basically, the deal is done. And what will happen is that the newly constructed Koshi City factory will build sensors for Sony, and it will be operated by TSMC. This is all about smartphone sensors because that's the biggest market here. There's still a little bit of regulatory stuff that needs to be closed, but it seems like it's happening. Sony says that they are keeping control. They're the sole controlling shareholder of this venture and are appointing the people who run it. And it will also consolidate into the Sony Group's books. There is, we don't know the exact equity split between the two companies, but this is happening. Sony keeps what makes its sensors distinctive in terms of development. So the pixel architecture, stacking, readout design. What TSMC does, they're bringing their leading edge logic process manufacturing Sony never had in-house. Because we know, they are one of the few manufacturers who can actually manufacture at these mini, 1.5 nanometer processes and so on, which of course means a lot more efficiency. The scope has a little bit narrowed compared to May. So we kind of missing these, in the memo, there was some talk about physical AI ambitions like in automotive and robotics. That has disappeared. Now this is really just for smartphone sensors for now. But yeah, we never know what happened in the background, but maybe that's just a start for them. What's interesting, in Kumamoto factory has been hit by an earthquake on July 28th, which has halted Sony's existing sensor plant. This is important to note because we've had this in 2016 before, where a lot of cameras were actually delayed because of an earthquake in the same factory 10 years ago. But this time they said it wasn't as bad, and now end of August, manufacturing should already have continued. That's what they said when it happened. So let's hope that's the case. They are now concentrating a meaningful share of the world's sensor capability really above that area, which is a bit interesting. With the new TSMC factory, this will mean there is a risk of more earthquakes that will happen in this area. And of course, there's a risk that something like this, an earthquake, will happen again. And just imagine another earthquake there in an industry that's already absorbing all those massively rising memory prices. What that would mean for the camera and smartphone industry of this world. Now, the Sony Group CEO frames this as the first step toward a Fab Lite model, which basically means Sony will do more to outsource manufacturing in the future. And we know that, we've talked about the Sony economics in the last episode. They've been doing really well. The sensor division is really carrying Sony as a company in terms of their profits. And the smartphone, kind of what they develop now for smartphones, is what we will see down the line in the Alpha and Cinema line, right? Because all the R&D now goes towards smartphones. And when we see this with the low-fix technology, which Sony is also working on now, and once this technology is established, we've later see it in their higher-end cameras, which is the irony here, which of course used to be the other way around, but now the good tech, the most cutting-edge technology will end up in smartphone sensors first. And so the open question here is just what will happen to those low-volume specialist cinema line sensors when, manufacturing with an external partner, because they have specifically said it's only about smartphones. So it's just the first step in this direction. But my read is just that in the next 5 to 10 years, we will see a lot more innovations around those small sensors than we will see in larger sensors. So good. All right, moving on to Kodak. Now, we did our episode of lots of quarterly, annual results, whatever, of the camera manufacturers last week. The last one that actually I wanted to look at was Kodak. Now, the interesting thing is, we know Kodak. I mean, that's the film company, right? Their Eastman Kodak is 130 years old, and they actually went through Chapter 11 in 2012, which is almost bankruptcy. And there was a going concern that we reported about 12 months ago. Also, that means like the future of the company was uncertain. And now it has posted its fourth consecutive quarter of year-over-year improvement, which is really, really great. So the quarterly revenue was $307 million. And that's really, really cool. Print was 195 of that, and advanced materials and chemicals, which includes the film, like motion picture film, had $105 million, which is a $30 million improvement year over year. The line that really matters for filmmakers is that the product line Kodak reports as films and chemicals grew by $30 million. And that's basically all the growth that they had in this quarter, which means, film stock, motion picture film stock is now their biggest growth factor, which is, I guess, a big irony in 2026. Their profit also rose quite a bit. I think, 30 million as well. And Kodak's motion picture VP has said motion picture film revenue is up 36% over the past 2 years. Now, there is a real film resurgence resurgence. As we know, it's just also now hitting the commercial reality, which is great. For example, the Odyssey, which was entirely shot on film, just crossed $1.1 billion at the box office. Huge commercial success. Entirely shot on 70mm IMAX, first film ever. So very, very happy to hear. And I think we reported about this last week or the week before that the majority of films which were nominated for Best Picture at the last Oscars were also shot on film. So there's a real trend going back to motion picture film. Yeah, I mean, anyone, that's a little caveat here, anyone following Kodak for a decade knows to treat the good news carefully. You know, they're mixed bag by design because they have 5 lines: industrial film and chemicals, motion picture film, pharmaceuticals, advanced materials, and functional printing and IP licensing. And they don't break out the motion picture film separately. We only know from that VP that it did really well. But there's other factors that, you know, kind of can make Kodak rise or fall. Just be aware of that. They're just not just dependent on motion picture film. It's just one part of it. So what I recommend you to watch is a very nice behind the scenes factory tour that Team 2 Films, Leon and Natalie Barnard, shot on film. I reported about this before. Maybe we can also put this link in the show notes. This is a very nice documentary on how motion picture film is actually made in Rochester, in the US, by Kodak. And they just really go into detail. And the entire thing was shot on 35mm film as well. We report about that, and a link is in the show notes. All right, moving on and actually sticking with film, motion picture film. Now there's an interesting product coming out, which is a home film processor. So if you're shooting Super 8, Double 8, or even 16mm, you might have always sent your film stock to the lab to be developed. Now, there's a company from Estonia called Vintage Visual who has developed a product called the Fränk film processor. Fränk with an umlaut ä. That is a device that allows you to develop film at home. Of course, you will still need the chemicals and everything, but this is really cool. The one machine can develop Super 8, Double 8, and 16mm, handling black and white C41, E6, ECN2, and ECP film, with off-the-shelf chemistry kits already sold everywhere. You need 1 liter per fill, and you can develop up to 100 feet per run, 250 feet lengths developing side by side on one of those spools. The clever part here is the firmware and not the motor, because there is a sensor-driven time compensation adjusting development as the chemistry cools. That's the one thing that manual processing cannot do, apparently. So what you do is, you see it here in the video, you warm the chemistry in a bath, and you have you measure the temperature, and when it's up to the temperature, you pour it into the device. And the cool thing is, with this device, you can have a same-day turnaround, including color. So basically, film that you shoot in the morning, you can hang to dry on the same afternoon, and instead of sending it to a lab and not see it for a week. So I mean, the turnaround is just much quicker if you're shooting film. You can load the reel in a changing bag, pour the chemistry through the funnel, and it's basically done. Now the cool thing is, this is an Indiegogo campaign, and it reached its goal in 7 minutes, which is pretty cool. The device is priced just below €1,000 or $1,100 something. It's going to be $300 more expensive as soon as it hits retail. There's also a little companion called Frankie, which is a 3D printed manual tank, which is a direct Lomo replacement with no motors or electronics. So if you want to do full manual development, you can also get that. I have a photo here somewhere. Oops, where's the Fränk? Here's Fränk, which is this tank system for manual processing. And they also have some, examples of developed film that was developed with this Fränk device. So pretty cool. And it's just you can see that demand for film is real enough that hardware startups are building processing machines around it. It's not something that I would have seen 5 or 10 years ago. And of course, standard crowdfunding caveat applies. This is a campaign and not a shipping product that you're paying for. But it seems like something that is actually real. Pretty cool if you want to develop your film at home. All right, and sticking with the cinema subject, but going back to digital, I think we reported a couple of times before about those apps that are very often vibe coded. We get a lot of emails every week, and I'm sorry if you're one of them who has emailed us and we have not gotten back to you about your app yet. There's a lot of apps that we get notified about these days. And most of them are vibe coded. And one of them is the int DCP Baker. So this is a $20 app that gives you a very, very easy way to make your DCP. And anybody who has ever had to do a DCP for a film festival or a delivery for a client knows how cumbersome this process can be. And there's also a lot of pitfalls that you can fall into. Now, DCP stands for Digital Cinema Package, and it's a standardized format for cinema projectors. Basically, every festival or theatrical delivery requires it. And making a DCP is the easy half because you can use Resolve and some free tools to handle it. The painful half is the delivery drive. Cinema servers require Linux X2, X3 file systems, which you cannot natively write using macOS. Until now, the options were a spare Linux machine, a virtual machine, or a paid file system drivers subscription system. There is an incumbent Mac tool, Cinematics DCP Transfer, but that costs $25 a month. Now, this company, I think it's a Tokyo-based company called Interceptor Inc. They also run a video production studio, probably out of their own need, have released this int DCP Baker version 1.0, which is basically the whole job is to make this in a single macOS window for a $20 one-time license. Basically the price of a couple of coffees, which is nice. This requires Apple Silicon, which I don't think is a problem because, most people have switched to Apple Silicon over the last couple of years. There's 2 stages. They have, of course, is a setup, but there's a prep, and they call it ready to bake. This builds a disk image and then the baking itself. And this writes to an external medium and verifies the result with SHA verification. X3 is the recommended target. X2 is also supported. You can add multiple DCPs on one medium, and the created image can be reused across multiple drives. Japanese and English interface, there's a trial as well, even though it's just $20. And that's really cool. Small tool, but it actually hits a huge pain point for a lot of people. The proof are the 20 comments below the article. So this is really cool. If you ever working on a DCP for festival submission or whatever, check it out. Really, really cool. We also, by the way, had the guy who made the app comment on the article as well. So he's available if you have any questions. Moving on to some hardware news. There haven't been many because it's August and I think a lot of people are just holding back their releases for IBC, which is, not too far away, just a couple weeks. But there has been a release by Amaran. Amaran, I would say, budget brand behind Aperture. They have spun off as an independent company in 2024. And until now, they've only made LEDs. Now, this is their global debut in audio. And notably, it's a desktop microphone for streaming and podcasting. It's not a camera wireless system. This is a $99 mic with a dynamic capsule. Unusually large for this class, with a 1.5 inch or 30 millimeter dynamic capsule, with a super cardioid pattern, which favors the voice in front and rejects the room. So this is something we could use for a podcast on the go. It's 48 kilohertz, 24-bit output fixed. There is no 32-bit float and no 96 kilohertz. I think that's fine for a device that feeds straight, into a call or OBS. It's really a voice microphone. It's not for acoustic instruments, room capture, or anything needing this high frequency detail that you might want when you record at 32-bit float or 96 kilohertz. 86 decibel signal to noise ratio, 130 decibel max SPL with a built-in audio limiter, and 3000 milliamp hour battery rated for up to 60 hours. That's pretty cool. Built-in battery, I think makes sense because this is something we could use, for example, on the go for our podcast recording. It's wired via USB-C or wireless via a prepared USB-C receiver on 2.4 gigahertz. That's for up to 50 meters unobstructed. And there's also a mini jack connector for all headphone monitoring on the device itself. There is a separate desktop stand that's available. Yeah. But anyway, I think it's something that makes sense. We see a lot of manufacturers just, going more and more into the creator market. And as more and more people are starting podcasts, companies are trying to make it easier without wires. I mean, we have a lot of wires here on the ground, even though I still prefer wired for the, good connection, of course. But on the go, I can definitely see us using something like this. But you see, as you see in the promotional video, they are also targeting at streamers playing Twitch on their computers, or streaming via Twitch and playing games on their computers rather. Yeah. Anyway, $99, 99 euros, and I think available now. Moving on to a little film, and I just wanted to highlight that DJI released, which was interesting. So DJI hired Isabelle Huppert, the acclaimed French actress, to star in a short film, which was entirely shot on the Osmo Pocket 4P. I would say it's really an art film. There's not much, not a big narrative arc here. She also directed it. Quite interesting. I mean, it's continuously moving. It drifts past figures, tree shadows, bookshelves, and door frames. She says that transitions can become gestures rather than cuts. I mean, what it does prove is that the high dynamic range just is quite clear in this little thing. And I think it really shows the direction that DJI is heading with this. They really want to get also in the existing high-end filmmaking scene with the Osmo Pocket 4P. And yeah, I mean, in the film, they're also trying, really bridging cultures, their whole crew. And the topic is basically a Chinese person learning French, and the entire crew is also Chinese. So I think they're really trying to bridge cultures here in a way, and just convince people how well the Osmo Pocket 4P can be used for high-end filmmaking as well. There are some impressive shots in there, which, if seen by themselves, I would not have guessed that they were shot on the Pocket 4P. You can also see, of course, with Isabelle Huppert, I mean, there's some kind of filtration going on whenever she's in frame, which is normal if you film with an actress of that caliber, I guess, but it kind of, sacrifices a little bit of sharpness. Anyway, interesting take by DJI to release something like that. And let's see what's coming next from them in the high-end filmmaking space and from the Osmo Pocket 4P. The other gear-related news this week was that Steadicam announced the Elite, which is really for hybrid cinema and live production work. Now, this is a new flagship from Steadicam. The structural headline is a rigid unibody top stage. Tiffin's argument, the company behind Steadicam, is that greater torsional rigidity reduces vibration transfers through the sled, enabling a higher payload rating and wider spread of workable builds. And there's, of course, also an operator problem. A stage that flexes under a heavy long lens build doesn't just, soften the image. It also makes balancing a moving target as the rig accelerates and decelerates harder. But this, should actually work against that. We are really not Steadicam operators, so we can't really make any comment on how much sense this makes. But it is a flagship model, so it's priced in the same range. So this is listed as $10,000 at B&H. And there's also a V mount or a gold mount version with the same price. All right. And last but not least, our educational article of the week is about point of view perspective in film, controlling tension, immersion and empathy. Masha's craft essay on the POV shot as a directing tool. This is really structured around the three things that I mentioned from the title. On one hand, you want to control tension as a filmmaker. You want to give the audience immersion, just to the feeling that the characters are looking at you rather than, you are looking at them. And also, of course, somebody who is looking at you, this can build the empathy. So when we're inside a character's head and we can experience the world through their eyes. And then also that means that the psychological link strengthens. Their worked example here is the Titanic dancing scene, which is also in the featured image. Let me see if it's embedded here as well. Yes, here it is. And this, of course, you can look through the eyes of the character, and it really throws the audience into the character's POV in the middle of the spin. Let's just wait for that moment here. So they start to dance on the Titanic, and then you can, as a viewer, of course, almost physically feel the swirl. Like it starts with a normal, kind of shot filming them. You see the camera already moving sideways, and then you switch to his POV, looking at her and back at him, and it just kind of gives you total immersion into the scene. So you're not just a spectator anymore. I would also recommend you to look at another article that Masha wrote if you're, interested in learning more about this immersion, which is called Unlocking Performance. That's the one that we covered last week. And there's also a companion piece on this from another episode, which we will link in the show notes if you're interested in that. All right. And I think with that, we can close this week. I did a lot of talking. I need to drink some coffee now. Don't forget to email us your comments at podcast@cinedy.com if you want anything discussed, if you have any concerns or questions about the podcast. And don't forget to leave a comment on the YouTube video or the article, and to subscribe on your favorite podcasting platform, Apple Podcasts or Spotify, and hear you next week. Bye.